Minecraft is a game that's full of all sorts of adventures and it literally has no boundaries. But what if we strip that all away? What if we confine ourselves to a very, very small space? In other words, we have to survive 100 days in one Minecraft chunk. Also, if you enjoy this type of content, make sure to subscribe because this literally took hours upon hours to make. Anyways, grab a snack, grab a drink, and enjoy this one heck of a 100 days video. Alright, day one has officially begun and I gave my friend a little rundown on what everything was going to be. We grabbed some trees and somehow I managed to get pickup priority, and then I made this little crafting table, brought it to the back, and then we just cleared out a bunch of land. Not really much for day one. I started mining down and began to realize that you don't really get your hunger back.
Oh, chill!
I hit my friend into this pit, got down to 1 heart, and it was suddenly day 2. And this is where I made a massive mistake. I mined this iron and then all of a sudden I had this sudden urge to fight some mobs. So I saw this creeper and I was kind of just ready to fight this thing. So I go in and then the first hit I take, I get stuck in this water. So I'm like, oh no, I'm actually gonna die. Luckily it doesn't blow up, and then the second one, I'm just stupid. Alright guys, please don't flame me in the comments. I know it's only day 2, but I promise I will never die again. After I died, I mined a bunch of coal, and then I headed up to the surface to call it a day. Day 3, we found a massive lava pool at the bottom of the chunk, and we could finally go to the nether. I was mining for a little bit, and then I managed to find some diamonds. And if you didn't know, diamonds are super rare because in any given Minecraft chunk, you're pretty much only going to see 1 vein of diamonds. So we dug around that, and then I tried to speed portal and messed up, and I ended up mining this obsidian with my stone pickaxe. I finally built the portal and then waited 5 minutes for Ospy to finally get some flint and steel. Honestly, this probably felt like one of the longest Minecraft days ever. We finally made it into the nether and took a long look around. We didn't really see much, so I grabbed some netherrack and headed back. Day 4 rolled right along and we made a ton of new stuff. We made the seed farm, the tree farm, and then this creeper just pretty much blew up everything. I mean, not everything, it blew up a bunch of our chunk, and it actually didn't take that long to repair, but one problem we had was food. So we went and killed some zombies for rotten flesh. It was a really quick solution, but it didn't really work that well. As you can see, when I ate the rotten flesh, I got that like food poisoning thing. So I mean, I guess it helps me heal and stuff like that. We broke a bunch of trees, started this wheat farm, and yeah, that's pretty much all we did for day 4. Day 5 was a big day, simply because of one thing. I actually found this trick where you can take water bottles and put them into a cauldron to get another water source. I actually didn't know this before, and we only had 1 block of water, and now we could actually make an infinite water source. Now after this we can make mob grinders, farms, all that kind of stuff that would prove useful in the future. On day 6 and 7, we basically just spent the entire time creating a new wheat farm. We had a wheat farm above, but we wanted to make a way bigger one, so we mined out 3 layers of this chunk, which is probably around like 700 blocks. And not only that, but we had to use stone shovels and stone pickaxes, so this literally took forever. And then I grabbed some logs and I discovered, guess what? A beehive. If you didn't know, in the 1.16.2 update, a tree next to a flower has a 5% chance of spawning with a beehive, so that was a cool little cherry on top. On day 8, we pretty much just filled in the entire farm with dirt so we could actually start hoeing it and putting, wheat, carrots, whatever we could find, because at this point we were just starving and I was tired of eating rotten flesh. And then I started working on the staircase, which took me like 3 minutes to make for being 4 stairs long. Finally, I managed to complete it and we had a way to get down to the farm like really efficiently. And then I started putting this water into the farm. I mean, yeah, pretty simple. You need to hydrate the crops. Day 9, we started hoeing out all the land, and finally we started adding some, seeds. And then because we didn't really need this farm on the surface, we pretty much just broke all of it and then jumped on the grass blocks like a trampoline. Now finally we had a bunch more space where we could build a house, a bunch of different stuff, and then right after that I bottled this honey. Surprisingly, it gave me 3 hunger, which is way more than I expected, and that's just another food source. I started off the day fighting the skeleton on 1.5 hearts, and then my axe broke, but luckily I managed to take care of him without dying. We worked on a ton of lighting in the farm because we had a ton of trouble like placing these seeds down. Then I grabbed a bunch of logs. Honestly, day 10 was super unproductive because we just talked and like pretty much did nothing until sunrise. Day 11 also started out by getting attacked by a skeleton. Luckily, I managed to take care of it really easily because I'm just good. Anyways, we basically had to do a ton of renovations to the farm, and then after that, we ended up grabbing some logs. These logs would prove very, very beneficial to us because we needed to do some massive decoration to the farm, so that's exactly what I did. On the night of day 12, we were tending to the log farm when I suddenly had a massive encounter with the creeper. Now the creeper actually wasn't that big of a problem, but out of nowhere, since we hadn't slept in so long, we got attacked by phantoms. The phantoms actually didn't do as much as we thought they would, but it was kind of weird, and we knew that we had to get beds at some point or we would have to deal with phantoms forever. Days 13 and 14 were massive decoration days. I was not happy with how the chunk looked, so I just added a ton of stuff to the chunk in general. I added these stairs to this platform that Ospy made to hide from the phantoms, and honestly, it didn't turn out that bad. We then mined up a ton of our workstations and then put them under these stairs, and it honestly looked super cool. And then after that, I was just running around and I saw Mr. B just having a good time under the platform. Then it started to rain and I added these gutters to the platform and these super cool pillars. I actually ended up stripping the oak logs and it looked very, very cool. Then I added some saplings to the farm and just dropped down and enjoyed the rain while it lasted. Day 15, man, this was a fun one. I started by transporting our bees down to our farm because if you didn't know, bees can actually speed up the process of growing crops if they fly over them. We put down our beehives and then the bees just seemed to be having a fun time again. I then placed a bunch of flowers on the outside of the farm so the bees could actually gather pollen and help out our crops. This is very, very important because at the point, this crop farm was our only way of getting food. Happily, the bees seemed to be having a good time and we were all happy. Day 16, I was really low and I needed some food. I farmed a bunch of these crops and then when I headed up, I actually found out that Ospy had built a hot tub. Before this, I had never seen a hot tub being built in Minecraft, so we added some final finishing touches and honestly just couldn't wait for it to rain because who doesn't like a hot tub in the rain? On day 17, I started using the composter for the first time and actually getting bone meal so we could grow the crops faster. After that, these bees came up and I was trying to place down some flowers so they could actually pollinate for us, but they ended up chasing me down probably because they were hungry. We grabbed some more flowers and then bred the bees, and then after that, at night, we got attacked by phantoms again. Luckily, this time we were armed with stone axes and our skill, so we managed to take care of them very, very quickly. From day 18 to day 20, we actually started building a second farm under the first one. It was taking a very, very long time to actually complete, so I actually went up and started crafting a bunch of stairs so we could have an actual staircase all the way down to our nether portal. It was honestly going to take a super long time, but at the end, it would be way, way more efficient than having to head bump up all of those cobblestone blocks. And then I finally completed it and was able to go all the way down to bedrock. On day 21, it was raining, and this was an excellent time to use the hot tub. So I hopped in and it was honestly a super, super, super fun time. I then lit up all of the stairs all the way down to bedrock so that no mobs would spawn. Because before, a creeper had blown up all of our progress and I did not want that happening again. And then speaking about creepers, I found out that a creeper explosion had gotten water onto our staircase. This was a massive problem because the water source was coming from outside of the chunk and the staircase was on the side of the chunk. But I had a genius plan and I grabbed some lava so I could put it on top of the water and then turn it into cobblestone. I did this and it actually worked, surprisingly. Now we had an actual functional staircase all the way down to our nether portal. And then finally, I just polished up the rest of the staircase so we could actually go down it. Day 23, I was very, very hungry. I started by harvesting a bunch of crops and then replanting, and then after that, I got super distracted by this bat. And then I had to take out a creeper that was coming up on our staircase, and then after that, I actually wanted to light up the bedrock area, so I went in and just started fighting all of these mobs. Honestly, they seemed to be getting distracted by attacking each other, so that just made it way more easy for me. Day 24, I was way too lazy to actually do anything, so I practiced this trick I came up with called the 2-stack. Basically, you would place one block, and then midair you would place 2. I actually managed to perfect this, so, at least something productive. I'll be quite honest, day 25 through 27 just kind of saddened me. We basically had to start working on this new mob farm, and by working on this mob farm, we would no longer be able to see the rain. It kind of made me sad, but at the same time, I knew that we had to make this mob grinder where we would literally have access to no mobs and just items at all. We took a little break by breeding these bees, and then we got to work on the mob grinder. I actually wanted to build the entire thing out of stone bricks, so we had to melt like 16 stacks of cobblestone. And then we began working on the chute, and it started to rain. Again, I was really sad because this mob grinder was probably going to take up the entire sky, and we would never be able to see it rain again. After that, I got to work on the mob grinder, and I went with a design where basically mobs have to fall off of a ledge into water, and then they're swept into that chute. At the bottom of the chute, we would be able to kill the mobs and then get all of the items that we would actually need. This mob grinder took a very, very long time, and honestly, I was so glad that we finally finished it. I then headed down to the ground area to pretty much just do nothing, and then I also practiced MLG water bucketing for the rest of the day. On days 28 through 29, I added some final finishing touches to the mob grinder, and I actually had to tear down a large portion of it because I built the chute wrong. This meant that I had to smelt a bunch more cobblestone so that we could actually make it enclosed on all sides, but luckily we actually had a ton of cobblestone from clearing out all the land for the farm. This mob grinder was already taking so long to make, and hopefully, very much hopefully, it would actually pay off in the future. A lot of the drops from mobs included string from the spiders so we could make fishing rods and beds, and then also, most importantly, iron ingots from the zombies so we can make a ton of new tools. And on top of that, we would also get experience from the mobs, but unless we made an anvil, we wouldn't really use it at all. Then, I finally finished up the mob grinder, I added a wall. I got Ospy to actually help me out with some of the building, which was very much appreciated. Thank you if you're watching this. And on top of that, we just smelted some more cobblestone. On day 30, I started wrapping up the roof for the mob grinder, and just looking at it, I was very proud of what I had accomplished. This was easily one of the longest projects we would ever work on this world, but it still needed to be finished. So I headed back up to the mob grinder and actually finished filling in this entire place. It looked really cool so far, and then I headed back down to just grab a bunch more stuff. I probably made a massive mistake trying to build this entire thing out of stone bricks, but to be quite honest, it looked way cooler than having to look up at cobblestone for the rest of the time. As I waited for the rest of the cobblestone to smelt, I was really hoping that this thing would actually work. I'd already dedicated so much time to actually creating it and smelting pretty much everything, and if it actually paid off, it would be one of the most successful things on this one chunk server. I grabbed the rest of the stone, and then after that, I finally finished creating the roof for this mob farm. I then headed up to the very top of the world to place down some torches and just pray that this thing would work. But there was one small problem. The mob grinder didn't work. The first problem we thought was that mobs were actually spawning in unlit caves throughout the world. So we went on a massive search and found only one cave in the entire one chunk world. We managed to clear it and light it, and finally we went back up to check if it even did anything. And surprisingly enough, it pretty much didn't do anything. No mobs were spawning, and in order to fact check that, I went all the way up and checked inside of the grinder. Because there's no other place for mobs to spawn in the world, there's no reason why they shouldn't have been spawning in here. But when I looked in, the answer was that there was nothing. It was completely dark, but there were just no mobs at all. So I tore the entire thing down and thought the problem was that we were standing way too close to the mob grinder. This time I was going to make it around 15 blocks higher and just give it way more space in general so that mobs would have a bigger space to actually spawn in. So that's exactly what I did from day 33 through 36. I first tore down the entire mob grinder despite the extreme hard work and effort we had put into it. In my opinion, it was super sad seeing all of the stone bricks drop down to the chunk floor because we had already spent so much time just placing them. I remember back when I used to play Skyblock a lot, I needed to actually understand how a mob farm worked in general. I'll give you a basic rundown, but basically, mobs can only spawn when they're 24 blocks or more away from a player, and they start despawning when you're more than 35 blocks away. This was exactly why I made the platform 32 blocks above where I was going to stand, and as I continued to carry out the grueling work of building this grinder, I was more than happy that I had this knowledge. I was sure that I had built the first mob farm more than 24 blocks away, but it could have been that some sort of glitch or some sort of bug inside of the game prevented the mobs from spawning. But in general, I really just hoped that it would work. This second mob farm was about twice as big as the original, and it was taking forever. But finally, I was beginning to see the light at the end of the tunnel. On day 37, it was raining again, and I headed up to the mob farm and pretty much just wrapped it up. I added some water that went all the way down from the chute at the top, so that the mobs would take the perfect amount of damage and get down to half a heart, so we could just punch them and get the experience. I then placed torches all over the top of the mob grinder so that mobs couldn't spawn on there, and then I just took down the torches inside of the mob grinder in general. Then, I dropped down to the surface to see if any mobs would spawn at all. I was honestly hoping so much that this would work, because if it did, it would honestly help us out so much. Also, the next 3 days after this were streamed right here on YouTube, so shameless plug, but subscribe if you want to see more of these types of videos. Unfortunately, just like the first mob grinder, nothing actually happened. I was sure that mobs had to have been spawning up there, but nothing was there at all. Being quite disappointed, we danced around the chunk, pretty much doing nothing for the rest of the day. Honestly, it was such a massive disappointment that we had spent the last 10 days doing nothing. Day 40 came right along, and honestly this was a massive day in terms of discoveries. There was a single thing that Ospy and I had forgotten about, and that was fishing. We tried to make a basic fishing farm but realized it had to be wider, so Spy built one on the roof of the mob grinder. Finally, that useless build was coming in handy. And then later on that night, we got attacked by phantoms, and I mean ambushed. We heard the sound, and then out of nowhere, the phantoms just attacked us. Days 41 and 42, I fished for as long as I could, but to be quite honest, I wasn't really getting anything that good at all. Besides the occasional rotten flesh or pair of leather boots, I was really only getting items such as fish. To be honest though, I couldn't really complain. This was just another food source besides bread that I could use, and you may be asking, where are you going to get the fuel to cook these fish? The answer is a campfire. In Minecraft, you can actually cook 4 pieces of food on a campfire and never run out of fuel. This was so good because that meant that I could have infinite cooked fish, which honestly I think is better than bread. Day 43, I started off by shooting some spiders so I could get string to finally make a bed. I also did a little bit of organization to our base in general. And then on day 44, I made a massive discovery and realized the reason why I was getting no good items at all from fishing. In the 1.16 update, Mojang was trying to patch AFK fish farming and added a new mechanic where a fishing area has to be 2 blocks deep to actually get any good items. I spent the entire day making this change, and rest assured, it genuinely worked. Honestly, if it wasn't for those big redstone YouTubers like Ilmango, Iskal, or Mumbo Jumbo, I never would have known about this, and I would have just fished for cod and nothing good for the entire time. I spent the entire day making this change to our fishing pool, and after adding this, I just began fishing for a very long time. And from days 45 to 48, that's pretty much all I did. Just fishing, and fishing. A big problem I encountered was the fact that we had little amounts of string to actually keep making the fishing rods because the mob farm didn't work and it was getting harder and harder to find spiders on the chunk itself. But the fishing in general was 100% worth it. While it's very hard to get any good items, the potential treasures you can get from fishing include enchanted books, enchanted bows, more fishing rods, and on top of that, you're pretty much only getting food while you're fishing for these valuable items. Also, during these days, I finally made a bed, so I was able to sleep through the long nights and avoid phantom attacks. I would definitely say that these 4 days of fishing definitely paid off. I was able to get a few treasure items and a ton of food in general. But on day 49, Spy and I had some totally different plans. We were going to start moving our base of operations to the Nether to begin working on a massive new build. Before entering, we saw this zombie pigman having a very fun time, so we joined in with him. We then just headed into the Nether and began scouting it out for potential good places to make the build. We knew this build was going to take a very long time, but we were ready for the task. On day 50, we made a massive staircase all the way up to the bedrock area of the Nether and began mining out a massive space for a new gold farm. We wanted it to look super clean, so we focused on clearing the netherrack from the ceiling, which was probably a massive mistake because it was taking forever to get those hidden blocks out from there. We then started mining out the entire space in general and knew that this would take forever. From days 51 to 59, we spent a majority of our time mining out netherrack. We probably mined around 8 to 10,000 blocks in total, but we genuinely needed to because this gold farm was going to be the key to getting all sorts of new items on the server. In the 1.16 update, Minecraft added the ability to trade gold with piglins to obtain a bunch of items that would otherwise be impossible to get on the one chunk world. We decided to go with a design where zombie pigmen would spawn, and then we would tower up and hit them like you would with an iron golem in a village. But first, we would need to mine out a lot of blocks, and I genuinely mean a lot of blocks. Not only would we have to mine out a ton of blocks, but we would have to use stone pickaxes for the entire time. This made the process way slower than I actually hoped it would be, but in the end, it all worked out. On top of that, this netherrack would be super useful for smelting into nether bricks, so we could actually add a decently cool floor for the farm itself. Even if we weren't going to have a ton of items on the server, we at least wanted the majority of the world to look like we put effort into it. On top of that, we probably made like 4 or 5 trips back and forth to the overworld just to restock on stone pickaxes and wood. We even ended up making a little area just to store all of the netherrack we mined, and while these 8 days were super long and boring, they had to be done just so we could get a ton of new items. By day 60, we had finally finished mining out all of the netherrack that we actually needed to make the farm. We began to smelt these blocks into nether bricks and started to add the flooring for the farm as well. A lot of this time was spent just smelting a ton of blocks because one smelted netherrack only makes 1 nether brick, and you need 4 nether bricks to make one of the blocks. This meant that we literally had to smelt hundreds upon hundreds of the netherrack we had mined, and because we had such a shortage of coal, we had to smelt logs on top of that just so we could have some sort of fuel for the farm. But the gold farm seemed to be working very well. Lots of pigmen were spawning and we were actually getting decent amounts of gold. I ended up trading with a piglin for the first time on the one chunk world, and I got gravel, which I never would have had on the world. On top of that, you can get things like leather, fire charges, crying obsidian, and tons of other cool things from piglins that I could never even dream of having on this world. This was probably the most successful project of this entire server. Day 62 went very similarly to the previous days. It was just tons of time spent on smelting, and I actually ended up mining 1 more layer so I could place down the flooring for the farm. I also spent a lot of time just killing pigmen, but one thing I really needed was a reliable way to be able to trade with piglins. It was starting to become a hassle to try and find piglins every single time I needed to trade with gold, so that's what I tried to do on day 63. For the rest of day 62, I just crafted a bunch of nether brick blocks and tried to fill in as much of the flooring as I possibly could. And then day 63 was just another one of those mundane days. For the past 5 days, I had just been smelting, filling in flooring, and pretty much just doing nothing, so I tried to switch up a few things on day 63. I was in the sudden mood to slaughter a bunch of piglins, so I actually went after this one in the back corner of the farm, and it just pretty much did nothing for me. Honestly, I think it was pretty much just a waste of time. But day 63, I don't exactly remember that well, because just like the previous days again, it was just really boring. Now on days 64 and 65, things started to shape up a little bit for us. It just started with the typical killing of pigmen for gold and the smelting of netherrack, but I actually decided to aggravate a bunch of pigmen that spawned in the back of the farm. And these pigmen gave me way more gold than I actually expected to get. I saved up this gold for future use, and in addition to getting closer and closer to finish the overall flooring, if that wasn't enough, I actually ended up finding this chicken who was abandoned by its pigment owner. I mean, I probably killed that owner, but I mean, what else would I do? But this chicken was the only passive mob on the entire One Chunk world. Never had any other animals spawn inside of the world, so this was super exciting for me. I named the chicken Mr. Clucks and put him inside of a little pen inside of the farm. Day 66 was just more killing of these pigmen because I needed a ton of gold for the trading that I was gonna do. On top of that, Mr. Clucks just looked super happy overall. I'm glad that he found his new home super welcoming. Day 67 was piglin trapping day. As I said earlier, I really needed to trap the piglins somewhere inside of the farm so that it would actually be easier to trade with them. So that's exactly what I did on that day. I used gold swords from the pigmen to actually get the piglins to walk into a little hut, and then I just trapped them using blocks. Now as soon as I got gold from pigmen, I could just head straight over to this hut area and trade it for a bunch of new items. Besides this entire adventure, it was just the typical filling of the farm and killing of the pigmen that day. And then on day 68, I made just a massive mistake. I saw this thing on YouTube where you could actually break a piglin's crossbow by having them fire over and over again, so that's what I tried to do. I wasn't exactly sure how to set it up, so I just angered them and then ran around the farm. Unfortunately, one of those bow shots from the piglins hit a zombie pigman, and for some weird reason, the zombie pigman was able to hit and kill the piglins. Now, I only had one piglin, so I would have to trap a whole nother one if I wanted it to look good again. Day 69, funny number day. I was trying to collect some loot from inside Mr. Cluck's pen when he managed to somehow escape from his home. I tried to push him back in with no luck, so I spent a large portion of the day just killing a bunch of zombie pigmen for gold again. There had to be like 20 pigmen, and to be quite honest, I was very scared for Mr. Cluck's safety. He was just wandering around the entire gold farm while I was trying to slaughter a bunch of mobs. After that, I headed all the way back to the overworld to grab seeds and lure Mr. Clucks right back into his pen. All that hard work was 100% worth it though, because Mr. Clucks was finally safe. Days 70 and 71 were both spent wrapping up the rest of the farm. After spending literal hours on this gold machine, I was finally proud to announce that all of the hard work had paid off. Not only did this farm work, but it also looked really cool in my opinion. You had Mr. Clucks' pen in the very back corner of the farm, and you also had the nether brick huts which housed the two piglins. I felt like I had to come up with some names for these piglins, so I named them Larry and Harry. Larry was the one on the left, while Harry was the one on the right. For some reason, it really felt like Harry gave me way better items, but that could have been because of luck. On this day, Spy also logged on, so I gave him a little tour of the farm. Day 72, I finally left the nether to go work on some things in the overworld as we had some massive plans. We decided to turn the useless mob grinder into a house. We were kind of tired of just using the wooden platform as a shelter, so this mob grinder would be super helpful in actually serving as a sort of housing. It took up so much space in the world, and we thought that it would actually be way more efficient than just using that wooden platform. We planned on using the chutes as a way to swim into the house, and while I was trying to fix the chute, I got trolled a bunch by Spy, but it all worked out in the end. Day 73 was another decoration day on the One Chunk Minecraft world. If we were really going to turn this mob grinder into a house, we would have to actually make it look nice. I began by covering the portions of the grinder where the mobs had once dropped with a bunch of stone bricks. Then, I relocated a bunch of things like our chests, our furnaces, and I even built a little ladder portion that could go up to our fishing farm. One little issue we had was that the water from the fishing farm was leaking from the ceiling into the house. But we didn't think much of it because the fishing pond was such a necessity for our world. We also added a ton of torches, even though mobs probably wouldn't spawn up there anyway, and we were finally able to call this once useless mob grinder a home. Just to end off the day, I got ambushed by this zombie, but I was able to take care of it really quickly. For the next 8 days, I just constantly fished. While it was super boring at some points, I needed to actually start preparing for the end dragon fight, and fishing was one of the ways to do it. Throughout these 8 days, I was able to grind up to experience level 30, and I even ended up getting a Depth Strider 2 book and 2 enchanted bows that had a ton of really good enchantments on them. These would probably prove very useful for when we fought the Ender Dragon, and I was pretty glad that I had used this time to just fish. Fishing has to be one of the most peaceful things in Minecraft, and it was a great way to take a break from big building projects like the gold farm or the massive mob grinder. Day 83, I got straight to work just mining. I couldn't believe how close we were to fighting the Ender Dragon, and I realized how little armor we had. I knew that we still hadn't explored a large portion of the chunk, and there was most likely a ton of iron hidden beneath the depths of stone. I knew that if we could both have full sets of iron armor before we fought the Ender Dragon, we would probably be set in terms of killing the Ender Dragon, but with little to no armor, the task would be much harder, and we probably would not be guaranteed to actually kill the boss. So on days 84 to 85, that's pretty much all I did. Just mined and mined in this fashion called strip mining, where you would mine strategically to try and find groups of ores. One thing I probably should have done was place down torches, as mobs were beginning to spawn in these unlit tunnels. And on days 86 and 87, I just did the exact same thing. I started stocking up for the dragon fight by harvesting lots and lots of wheat to craft into bread. In 1.16, food is probably the most important part of any fight, because as long as your food bar is full, you can pretty much regenerate infinite amounts of health. In addition to that, while I was traveling up and down the staircase, a creeper explosion actually exposed a large vein of iron. And on day 88 and 89, I had just an incredible idea. I had spent so much time on massive building projects and all sorts of things that weren't the most interesting aspects of Minecraft. But out of the blue, I came up with a plan to try and get music discs. Basically, if a skeleton kills a creeper with its bow, the creeper will not only drop gunpowder, but it will also drop a disc. Because we had an extra diamond from mining, we could use the diamond for a jukebox and then party to the discs. So on these 2 days, I hollowed out a little area for mobs to spawn in. My idea was to kill all of the creatures besides the skeletons and the creepers, and then line the skeleton up with the creeper. That way, I could efficiently farm large amounts of discs in the game. Even if I could just get 1 disc, this would be the highlight of the series, as discs are probably one of my favorite items inside of Minecraft. And then on day 90, I went down to the disc collection area where I saw the best sight ever. A skeleton and a creeper were both inside of the box, and this was it. If I could get the skeleton to line up behind the creeper and shoot it, I would be able to get my first ever music disc on the entire server. Surprisingly, everything went well, and I was able to get my first music disc. Now, I was obsessed with getting these discs. It was just a hobby of mine on the server, and it turns out that I got super lucky with the very first time I went down to the disc farming chamber. I spent such a long time trying to get spawns that included a skeleton and a creeper at the same time, and even when this sometimes happened, the skeleton would often shoot a zombie or another skeleton by accident and end up dying. Luckily, I was able to get around 6 more discs. But at this point, I was still not satisfied at all. In Minecraft, I think there's around like 13 obtainable discs that you can possibly get, and I had only gotten 7 of them. But my 2 favorite discs were called Cat and Chirp, and I had still gotten neither of them. On around day 97, I got a really lucky spawn with around 2 skeletons and 6 creepers, and after spending a really long time getting the skeletons to kill these creepers, I probably got 6 more discs, and one of them was Chirp. Now obviously I still hadn't obtained the disc called Cat, but I realized that I didn't have much time left in the one chunk Minecraft world, so I headed back up to the surface to begin preparing for the Ender Dragon fight. And day 99 was pretty much just all final preparations. I mined some gold I had found earlier in the series, and I also ended up making a golden apple. I crafted a full set of iron armor and made as much food as possible. It started to dawn on me that this entire series was coming to an end, but it also made me happy that we had gotten so far with everything. And wow, it was already day 100. I started off the day by playing all of my music discs in the jukebox and just dancing around my entire house. I gotta say, there is nothing more satisfying than listening to the hard-earned Minecraft discs that you've worked hard for. Then, I kinda just said goodbye to everything. I went to the Nether and said goodbye to Mr. Clux, Larry, Harry, and took a long look around. I came back and even wished the bees goodbye. Then, I climbed on top of my house and stared at the setting sun behind the confinement of the 16x16 world. Because, ladies and gentlemen, this was 100 days in one Minecraft chunk. Also, for those asking, the end dragon fight and the seed and coordinates are in the description of this video. Thanks for watching.